Good evening, it's Friday, July 3rd. I'm Sharon Nabobi, and this is Closing Price from FNDATA. We provide you a weekly read on the luxury and collectibles markets with the public companies behind them. This episode of Closing Price is brought to you by FNDATA, the market intelligence platform for insights on the luxury markets and related public equities. With a membership, you can unlock access to dashboards, reports, and cutting-edge insights to keep your finger on the pulse of the market and drive your competitive advantage. Learn more at altafndata.com/membership. The signal for this week is the same one that we have been following all quarter, and it reveals a twist at the end. Let's think of it as a split screen. On one side sits the public companies that sell luxury, whose shares spent the week sliding even as the wider stock markets climbed to new highs. On the other side sits the luxury goods companies themselves, with the paintings, watches, and handbags, and they spent the same week breaking records in the auction rooms. That gap behind the falling share prices and the real-life appetites for these objects is what we call the divergence, and this week it's held wide open. The worst of it was Kering, the French group behind Gucci. Its stock fell about 7%, although the softness ran right across the sector. The one striking exception, and the twist worth sitting with, was Watches of Switzerland, one of the largest sellers of Rolex in the world, and the only luxury name to rise meaningfully all week. What makes that rise so interesting is the reason behind it, because the company just did the very thing that its peers keep avoiding. And it was that the company admitted to a slowdown out loud. It scrapped its target of doubling sales by 2028 and conceded that the markets had cooled down. Rather than punish the retreat, investors rewarded this candor and sent the shares up more than 6%. For a single day on Thursday, the whole complex rallied and briefly moved in step with the auction sale room. But one strong session does not undo a soft week, and measured from Friday to Friday, the split held, with the markets rising and the records falling, while most of the luxury names still closed lower. Let's start with the equities, where the whole week can be read in the gap between the laggards and the leaders. Kering, as I mentioned, was the clear laggard, down about 7% to close at €248, still weighed down by the long, difficult efforts to turn Gucci around. The rest of the European names were mixed to soft. Swatch fell almost 3%, Burberry about 2.5%, Richemont about 1.5%, and LVMH, the giant that anchors the whole sector, finished essentially flat at €496. Hermès was the bright spot among the majors. It was the one house that never seemed to catch the cold, up nearly 1% to €1,641. And Watches of Switzerland led everything, climbing more than 6% on the week to 752 pence as its reset rally carried into the second day. We have a quick word on the American names because the US market was closed on Friday for the Independence Day holiday weekend. So the week effectively ran through Monday to Thursday, and it was a soft one. Movado fell about 5%, Ralph Lauren about 3%, and Tapestry and Capri each a point or 2. The lone exception was Estée Lauder, the beauty giant, up nearly 4% as investors bet its long turnaround is finally taking hold. Now, let's look at the backdrop because it is exactly what makes the luxury lag stand out. This was an up week for the broad markets. The Nasdaq rose about 2% and the S&P 500 close to 1.8%. Both were lifted by a jobs report released Thursday ahead of the holiday that came in soft enough to keep the prospect of rate cuts alive without hinting at any real weakness in the economy. And gold did the loudest thing of all, closing near a fresh record of $4,187 an ounce, up more than 2.5% on the week, as buyers kept reaching for the one asset that has done nothing but climb. So the markets rose, gold set another record, and still the luxury names could not keep up. While the share prices sagged, the appetite for the actual goods had one of the strongest weeks of the year. At Christie's, during what the trade calls Classic Week, the Old Masters sales set 7 world auction records in a single evening, led by a painting from Titian, the great Venetian master of the Renaissance, that sold for around $22 million, the most ever paid for the artist at auction. In the collectibles market, a single bottle of Clase Azul tequila changed hands at Sotheby's for $35,000, making it the most expensive tequila ever sold. And in the boardroom, Chanel reached back nearly 2 centuries to buy Charvet, the storied Parisian shirt maker on the Place Vendôme, choosing to own a piece of irreplaceable craftsmanship outright rather than chase volume. Records at the very top of the market, a marquee house spending real money on heritage, and a retailer quietly conceding the showdown were all inside the same 5 days. So, if we put the week together, the picture comes into focus. The equity market spent 5 days treating luxury as a fading consumer story, and on the raw numbers, it had a point, because the sector genuinely did lag. But the people who actually buy these things spent the same 5 days setting records and paying up for craft. The sharpest lesson of the week came from Watches of Switzerland, because the only luxury stock that meaningfully rose is the one that stopped promising growth it could not deliver. So here's the test that we can carry into next week. If Thursday's rally was the first sign of the share prices finally catching up to the demand they have spent months ignoring, then the records should keep coming and the stocks should begin to follow. If it was only a bounce, the gap reopens and we are back where we started. Either way, the goods themselves have been telling the truth all quarter, and sooner or later the market will have to listen. For the data behind today's signals, the FNDATA data sandbox gives you hands-on access to our market dashboards and datasets, so you can test the divergence and concepts yourself. Book a demo at altfndata.com/book or reach us anytime at info@altfndata.com. I've also added a link in the description of this episode. That's it on closing price for today, Friday, July 3rd. Subscribe to get notifications on new episodes, and if you love the show, please leave us a 5-star rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. I'm Sharna Bobi from FNDATA. I'll talk to you in the next episode. Thank you for listening.